Okay, let's go to the circulatory system. Now, what's the circulatory system of an arthropod? Pardon? We call it a haemocoel. Now remember, how is respiration accomplished in the insect? Through a series of tubes. So if I've got that series of tubes, the trachea and tracheals and spiracles, then that's off the table. I don't need to accomplish that with my circulatory system. In our circulatory system, the need for moving nutrients and waste materials to and from the cells is coupled with oxygen, getting oxygen to the cells and removing the CO2 from the cells. And so when we talk about the circulatory system, it's often a very complicated system. What else does your circulatory system do other than getting nutrients to your cells, taking waste material away from the cells, getting oxygen to them and CO2 away? What else does your blood do? I'm feeling the pain from my injections yesterday. Why am I feeling the pain? Pardon? My immune system is saying, oh, you put some foreign proteins in here, I'm going to set up some antibodies to counteract those foreign proteins. That's our immune system. And so we have an immune system. What happens when somebody's immune system is compromised, such as in HIV/AIDS? You can't fight off infections. You get diseases that a person without a compromised immune system can easily fight off. And now you can't fight those things off because your immune system isn't working. What we're going to find is that the insects do pretty much the same thing with their blood, except respire. So they're going to get nutrients to the cells, they're going to take waste material away from the cells, and they have an immune system that's located in there. Now, there's something else that your blood does. Have any of you been scared? And you get the, oh good Lord, and your hair raises up on there. That's a nervous response, but all of a sudden you might start hyperventilating and sweating a little bit. What the heck happened to you? You had some hormones released into your blood system. Those hormones were transported to your cells to cause those cells to start metabolism in anticipation that something bad's going to happen. Insects do the same thing. Insects also have hormones that are transmitted through the blood. You have a lot of hormones that are transmitted in your blood. You can have some of the alarm hormones that go in. What are some of the other hormones that your blood transmits? Come on, we know these. Testosterone, estrogen, yeah, and any others? Okay, so again, your circulatory system transports those hormones, and the same thing happens in the insects. When we talk about a haemocoel, and this goes not only for insects but also all arthropods, remember, have a haemocoel. What it means is that the body cavity is now just filled with this fluid, and this fluid is the thing that transports all the nutrients that we've talked about, and has blood cells in it for the immune response and so forth. But what we will find out is that there is the remnants. Remember that arthropods are protostomates. So in the earthworm, there was a closed circulatory system. But when we think that in the evolution of these, those segmented worms gave rise to probably a segmented arthropod. And instead of having a closed circulatory system, they just said, well, we're going to open this up in the body cavity because we can breathe through these trachea, but we still need something that helps slosh the liquid around. So the insects and arthropods still retain a dorsal pumping vessel. A lot of people call it the heart. I'm not too sure I like that. I prefer to use something like a heart and a closed circulatory system. But they have a pumping vessel that basically helps slosh this liquid around. Now, obviously, if I've got wings or I've got antennae and sometimes even in legs, these are appendages that would be very difficult to get that bathing hemolymph, the blood, into those. And what we find is that in some insects there are secondary little pumping organs. There are these little flaps that pump the blood and help move the blood out into those extremities. And we call those pulsatile organs. So here's a really generalized diagram. Again, this looks kind of like a grasshopper to me. And basically what we see is this large body cavity. Now the guts have been removed out of here, but I can see this large blood cavity, the haemocoel in here. There's still the dorsal vessel up here, but the dorsal vessel just basically has some holes in it. We call those ostia. And it is muscular, and so when the muscles relax, it tends to kind of open up, and that's going to suck some of the blood or the hemolymph into there. And then when the muscles contract, it's going to move that hemolymph forward. Now, the problem that I've got with this diagram is that it sort of shows this flow of the hemolymph going into these ostia and going forward. I've got a video that shows a caterpillar. You can see the dorsal vessel pumping, and it looks like it's kind of pumping that way. And then all of a sudden it stops. And then it looks like it's going the other way. Holy moly. And indeed, it's capable of doing that. It can actually show, whenever we need the blood and this material in one part of the body, it can move it that direction. But if it needs more of it in the tail, I'll just reverse the motion and push it the other direction in there. So if you think about it, all this dorsal aorta is something to help keep that blood, that hemolymph, circulating in the body. Now, what is in that hemolymph? It's primarily liquid, primarily water. There's going to be nutrients in that. That's an answer to one of Denisha's questions, is it's primarily nutrients. So sugars, amino acids, the vitamins, minerals, things like that are needed, hormones. We're going to find out later on that insects have a very complicated hormonal system that regulates that molting process, their sexuality, and so forth. So they need something that moves those chemicals through the body, and so they can have the influence on the cells that they need. If you take a look at insect blood, there are blood cells in there. There are no nice, neat little round blood cells like our red blood cells. Why not? What do your red blood cells do? That's the thing that carries the oxygen. They're filled with hemoglobin and they carry the oxygen. So if you don't need those, pretty much most of the hemocytes that we see in insect blood cells are irregular in shape. And if we take a look at this, well, let's take a phagocyte first. What do you think a phagocyte? Phago means to eat or feed. So what is that the equivalent of in you? That's the equivalent of your white blood cells. Your white blood cells are things that if they come into contact with bacteria or something that shouldn't be in the body, they try to ingest it. They try to eat it, phagocyte it. What is a coagulocyte? Insects get their exoskeleton poked. They might have a hole in it. What's going to happen? All the hemolymph could ooze out of there unless it clots. So that coagulocyte is coagulation of their blood. So they have cells that specialize in sealing that off and sealing the wound. You have the same thing. You've got cells in your body that help in the clotting process. Now, what do you think a prohemocyte would be? What's pro? Before. And a hemocyte is a blood cell So also in the blood are some undifferentiated cells that may form the phagocytes or the coagulocytes according to what's needed in that insect body. So there's a whole bunch of different kinds of cells in there. Most important thing, remember that, now, for anybody that's ever gotten bloodworms, these are little fly larvae that tropical fish people get to feed their fish. They're bright red in color. What does that mean? That means that they've got hemoglobin. But the hemoglobin is not in their cells. The hemoglobin is actually in the hemolymph. Now, why do you think that fly larva would have hemoglobin? Well, they often live in the bottom of ponds where there's very low oxygen tension. So they've developed, hemoglobin is really efficient at grabbing whatever available oxygen is there and pulling it out. So they've developed secondarily the use of hemoglobin, but they do not have red blood cells like we've got. So most insect blood will appear either clear or sometimes a slight blue-green color to it, because it doesn't have the hemoglobin that we associate with blood. This is our circulatory system. What did I show you in the grasshopper? Just a big chamber with a vessel at the top that pumps, and it can pump either direction in there. That's our system. Remember that we have a venous system and an arterial system. What does your arterial system do? It takes your blood from your heart to your lungs, from your lungs back to your heart, and then out to your body. And it goes out through arteries. Those arteries divide and divide and divide until they become capillaries. Capillaries are basically one cell layer thick of your blood vessels, but they're all joined together, and the blood cells can just barely kind of squeeze through those capillaries. But it's at the capillary action that the oxygen is taken out of the blood used by the cells. The CO2 is moved into there. It's also at the capillary area that your nutrients are taken out of the blood and waste material is put back into that blood. Then it has to come through the venous system, and that's illustrated in blue in here. That goes back to the heart, and the heart pumps that back to the lungs to exchange the CO2, get the oxygen replenished, and so forth. So as you can see, this is what we call a closed circulatory system. Arteries to capillaries to veins, and there's a pumping system that works with that. And so why do we have this kind of a system and not trachea? If you're going to be a big animal, this is the most efficient way to do it. When you're a small animal, a series of tubes will work, and just sloshing the stuff around in your body cavity will work. So it's one of the reasons why the biggest insects are no more than about a half a pound in size. That would be a really big insect. Now, one system that's often not talked about is this one. This is called the hepatic portal system. And remember that when you digest the nutrients out of your food and it goes into the small intestines and the large intestines, you have to absorb that material. You have to absorb those nutrients. Now, the nutrients don't immediately go into the blood system. What they do is they go into this hepatic portal vein, which goes up to your liver. And up in the liver, it goes through there and gets sorted out in your liver. So if you think about it, your liver is your primary organ for sorting out the chemicals that you've absorbed in your gut. Why would we have that liver? Well, you absorb all kinds of nasty stuff. Your gut's not really efficient at sorting out the good stuff that you need for energy and some other things that you don't need. And so your liver is the thing that says, yep, I can use this, I can convert this. So your liver can also be sort of a clearinghouse of modifying chemicals and changing them so that your body can use them. And in other cases it says, whoa, I can't use this, I'm going to get rid of it. And kind of interestingly, what it does is it what we say chelates it. It joins it with something else so that it can't be digested again, puts that in your gallbladder, and then dumps that back into your gut. And now that it's chelated, you can't reabsorb it. It's going to go out in your poop at that time. Now this leads to some interesting things that happen. What's one of the major liver diseases? Have you ever heard of hepatitis? Okay. People that have hepatitis often have white feces that float. Why? They're not producing bile fluid. The bile fluid is not deacidifying, and another important part of bile fluid is that it can also emulsify fats. So you can't break apart the fats and absorb the fats. People that have hepatitis often have that anomaly that's with there. And so if you start pooping out white turds, get to the doctor. That's telling me that something's wrong with your liver, and you better watch out for that. So again, our liver is a sorting thing. What happens if you drink too much alcohol? Your liver says, I'm going to try to get rid of this, but I can't do it, so you get psoriasis of the liver. It kills the liver cells as those cells are trying to get rid of that. Okay, that's pretty much where we're going to end today, and we'll start up the next process of the nervous system next week. I'm sorry? Yeah, it's part of the circulatory system that a lot of people just don't talk about. But basically it takes all of the blood and the nutrients directly to the liver and the liver processes it, then it sticks it into the rest of the circulatory system.
I was able to pick up my exam last time. Do you have them?
Nope.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to see if
Sorry, I will bring them to, we'll probably hand them out at lab next week. So when you come to lab next week, you'll get them. Okay? Mm-hmm.